Okay, this video is for 11.2a, solving absolute value equations. So yesterday we talked about what an absolute value equation was and how it's like a measure of how far away from zero a number is. And so absolute value always turns numbers into their positive version because it's just a measurement of how far away from they are from zero. So even if it was something like -6, -6 is just 6 units away from zero. And so the absolute value of -6 is +6. Now, because of that, when you're solving absolute value equations, you end up usually with two possible solutions, the positive version and the negative version. And the reason is this. Let's start with the number line problems. The absolute value of x equals 8. Well, there are two things that this can be. It could be -8 or it could be +8 because both of those are 8 units away from 0. 8 is 8 units away from 0 and -8 is 8 units away from 0. So if you're trying to solve where the absolute value equals 8, there are two, the negative version and the positive version. So we would write x equals -8 or 8. Now, what that looks like when you're actually trying to solve these problems is once you get the absolute value function by itself. So in this problem, once we get rid of the +5 and it's just absolute value of x on this side, you can drop the absolute value bars by adding a plus or minus to the other side of the equation. So let's see what that looks like. Now first we have to get the absolute value equation or absolute value function by itself. So the first thing we got to do is subtract 5 from both sides. And now we get the absolute value of x equals 14. And now we can get rid of the absolute value symbol if we add a plus or minus to the right side. So x equals plus or minus 14. And now that x is by itself, this answer is finished. X equals positive or negative 14. Let's do one more. Again, we can only solve the absolute value function piece once it's by itself. So right now you see that there's a 3 outside the absolute value piece. So we got to get rid of that. That 3 is multiplying to the absolute value of x. So let's divide both sides by 3. And the 3's cancel. Leaves you with the absolute value of x equals 7. And we can drop the absolute value bars if we add plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus 7. Alright, let's look at a couple tougher ones. Or let's just look at one. Now, there's a lot going on here. 3 times the quantity of 7 times the absolute value of x plus 5 equals 120. So for us to get x by itself, we need to get the absolute value function by itself. That means we have to get everything else to the other side of the equation. Now, since we're basically undoing this, we have to start on the outside of the parentheses, then work inside, and then finally get the absolute value situation by itself. So, the way we start is we divide both sides by 3. The 3's on the left cancel, and it leaves you with 7 times the absolute value of x plus 5 equals, and 120 divided by 3 is 40. Now we subtract 5 from both sides. So 7 times the absolute value of x equals 35. Now we divide both sides by 7. These 7's cancel. So the absolute value of x equals, and 35 divided by 7 is 5. And one last step, we can drop the absolute value symbols if we add the plus or minus to the right side. So x equals plus or minus